Bring it back to Mr. Bunting and get his head coach's thoughts.
Yeah, it's, again, for him, the challenge would be not to get caught up in anything else other than what he can control, everything we've been talking about here. Because it is different. It's different that, he was a guy that would come in the last season. There was a lot of question marks could he establish himself in the NHL? It's a similar type of situation, Obey Kubel, and we were just speaking about in that sense. Different types of players and different roles and all that, but their situation was pretty similar. Now Bunce has clearly established himself as a successful player and an integral part of a very successful line for us. Now, other teams know who he is. They respect his game. Officials know who he is. All these kind of things. That's the second time around becomes a little more difficult on that sense. But in the other part of it, you've got greater confidence in your ability, and you know who you are, and you know what you're capable of doing. So I think all of that will serve him well, and the familiarity with his line mates and knowing that he has a clear and established role on the team should help him to just really focus to go out and do his thing.
I found it really interesting that he brought up that the officials know who he is right now. That's the first thing I thought of is like when coaches describe players, then when does the officials come into play?
Yeah, like the red flags are so obvious. The Leafs are just talking about the red flags. Like, Bunt's a diver.
You exactly. you know where that's coming from, right?
Yeah. It is. He's very unlikely to draw as many penalties this year.
And we talked about it as early as early last season.
You were on it early that he wouldn't continue to get those calls or that you didn't like it as much.
Oh gosh, it just catches up to you.
Yeah.
And he is good at it, and he will continue to draw penalties, no question.
Yeah.
I mean, some guys have a knack of putting their bodies in the right position, right time, but he's going to have to curtail the sales job on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that probably irked me more than anything, and this just doesn't go for Michael Bunting, but it goes for any other player, is the slow, drawn out, back on my feet move.
You're sort of injured.
Staying down on one knee for a split second, the head coming up, looking to the official, maybe the arms up a little bit.
You don't like it.
He's got to wipe that right off.
Yeah.
That's the comment that Sheldon Keefe mentioned through the officials that he didn't say, that they don't like that. Mm-hmm. They're smart enough or they're good enough to make the call on their own. They don't need your help.
Right. Yeah, a little insulting to those guys. So let me ask you a question on Bunting. Is there a season he can put together where you're like, we got to have him? Like, we can't afford to just let him walk like we did all these other players. This is a guy who has to be a part of this top line. Is there anything he can do? Last year he had 60 points and drew penalties. And is there something there for you that he can do?
Win a Stanley Cup? Get out of the first round?
Team success.
Somewhere in between there, for sure.
Yeah.
And I like him. I think he's an exceptionally smart, intelligent player. He's got really good timing. I think he's shown the ability to create offense with world-class players like Marner and Matthews. But there's still a part of me that goes into the Stanley Cup playoffs and question whether he's heavy enough to withstand 4 rounds and not get bounced around.
It's interesting because you mentioned this last year as well, but he got hurt at a bad time last year, didn't he? He played 79 games in the regular season, but he only played 6 in the playoffs. He missed a playoff game. I forget exactly what his injury was, but he only had a goal and 2 assists in the postseason after, 63 points in the regular season. And I forget what the exact injury was, but it did sort of play out last year that he wasn't healthy when they needed him. Be curious to see if he can play this sort of physically engaging style, play that much hockey again, and then, continue to be effective in the postseason. Where they don't have many guys. He's important. He's important because he goes to the blue paint and he yaps and he does something that not everyone else does. So need him healthy for sure.
Need him healthy. I assume he got a little stronger. You hope?
Yeah.
This year?
Had to have.
That Maybe he can come off a little heavier for me than he did last season. But
you play that same style.
In a perfect world on a championship team. This time last year, everybody was hoping that Nick Ritchie was going to be that heavy guy, that poor man Lucic that could drive holes for Matthews and Marner by going through people.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Bunting. Bunting's going to outsmart you to get the puck, to go around you.
Right.
Do we see any of that on that left side at all for the Toronto Maple Leafs? I don't. But that, to me, would have been a better case scenario, would have been a better Nick Ritchie in that hole. They're hard to find. We know that.
Yeah.
Leafs never did find him.
Rich was great.
Rich is great.
Rich went and had 10 goals in Arizona. He's on the first power play unit in the Mullet Arena this year.
That to me is there still that one guy missing of a real?
I think I'm higher on Bunting than you. I think I'm higher on Bunting than you, just because I think there's different ways to accomplish what you're hoping that he does, and it's a rat. I don't mean rat in a negative way, but it's a rattier way, right? He'll sneak up behind you, and he lurks, and he gets in the blue paint, and he, it's not through you. It's a different sort of way, but he has to use his brain. He's a smart hockey player. You're right. They don't have that sort of bulldozer left wing type guy, but.
And I thought in that little speech there that he gave about Bunting, it was a bit of a negative connotation that he was talking. Not necessarily negative, maybe not the right word, but it wasn't like glowingly positive, talking about how people are going to be looking out for him, other teams, the rest. I think there's a world, too, where these guys have now played together for how long, and they know each other. They've played great as a line, one of the best in the NHL. They just hit the ground running, and he has an even bigger year.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side of that is that they're even better, as opposed to the start of the year where he had to work his way up the lineup. So I think that goes both ways.
You're just getting now Matthews and Marner in that mid-20 prime years where the body's fully developed now, or it's as strong as it ever will be for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And if Matthews somehow can even go to another level, 65, 70 goals, is it a stretch to think that? Is there a stretch to think that Marner can now go to maybe 110, 120 points? And if that's the case, then it's not going to be hard for Bunting to take his 60-plus points and turn them into 80.
True. That's a really good point. If those guys are as good as they were last year, Bunting didn't start on that line. Matthews, what do you have, a goal in the first 8 games? I don't remember.
He missed the first couple. Was it missed the first 3 games?
He had a wrist thing to start the season, so he had a slow start. Like, if they just come out of the gates, there's an 80-point season on the table for Bunting, in which case he's worth what? 5x5? Is he the next guy to go get the Hyman contract?
Just
Mikheyev just went and got 4x4.
All you have to do is the math around the league on guys 60 and 80 points.
Yeah, you're 26, you got 80 points? Okay. That's 5x5.
Bunting's agent's like, please, 5x5. I'm eating. I can barely eat
ketchup sandwiches after his last bargain basement deal.